Hello, everybody. Welcome. It is Thursday, January the 21st. Hello, everybody. It's so great to see you. I want to start by saying thanks for watching today. Thanks for spending time with me. Thank you to my moderators. Y'all are so helpful. Thank you so much. So glad you're here today. Today, we're going to be doing the pie block. Let me hold one up so that you can see it. I've made 7 so far. Isn't that so pretty? Isn't it so pretty? I got a ton of fat quarters. The last time we went to Vermont, we went to a quilt shop in Westminster. And yes, gorgeous fat quarters. That's what I'm making this quilt with. I'm going to be making 63 of these blocks for this quilt. And yes, I am super excited. It's going to be a long-term project for me in the next couple months. Whenever I have some free time, I'm going to make some blocks to make a gorgeous quilt. Today's pattern is free. There's a 4-page PDF down in the description box. Make sure to grab that if you want to make this block. Y'all, there's a couple variables with this block, and we'll go over those when we get to that part. But yes, free pattern in the description box. Make sure you jump over there and grab that. It is so great to see y'all. It is so great to see you. Yeah, the snowballed corners, Jean. That's one of the variables. And in the pattern, I show like 2 different layouts. One layout without it, which is gorgeous. But if you snowball the corners, which I'm going to show you today, what I'm doing to do that, then it gives the quilt a totally different look and fills in a lot of the empty space around the circles. Hello. Hello, everybody. Now, if you're watching on the replay, feel free to skip to where we get started. And we are live today. And if you're here live, feel free to join in the conversation. One of the reasons we go live every Thursday is to spend time with one another. That's the main purpose behind going live every Thursday. It's so great to see y'all. So there will be chatting in this video. If you just want to get down to the nitty-gritty, feel free to where I get started. Feel free to skip through. It is so great to see y'all. It is so great. Yeah, y'all can see I have a t-shirt quilt up on the wall behind me. I've got all the blocks cut. This afternoon, I'm going to get fabric for the sashing and cornerstones. And so, yeah, busy. Before we get started, and I think we've answered the question before we got started in the live today, but Beverly had a question. Let me pull up Beverly's question. She said, I'm having a hard time trying to get on to Patreon. I'm a member, but when I click on the app, it wants me to sign up. What am I doing wrong? Beverly is using an iPad. So Mary answered your question, Miss Beverly, before the chat. And I don't know that if you saw her response to your question. Mary said, make sure to download the Patreon app from the App Store onto your iPad. And then once it's downloaded onto your iPad, click on it and follow the prompts that come up, and it should let you write in. I'm hoping that that works and that brings you right in. But if it doesn't, let me know. I know that Jeannie also uses an iPad, and she said she was going to be here a little later. So if it doesn't work, let us know. But I'm hoping that that answers your question. Thank you so much, Mary, for sending in that response. Valeria said, when are you going to do my t-shirt quilt? You haven't sent me any t-shirts, Valeria. Oh, Diana said, I would not snowball because I'm a long arm quilter and I love the negative space. Well, certainly if you don't snowball the corners, you're going to have a lot of negative space to do some really creative quilting. But I do think that the negative space after snowballing lends for some really cool space around the circle to do some really pretty feathers. I don't know. I've been, when you make a block, I'm already thinking about how would I quilt this quilt. And that's just something that's come to mind, is some really cool feathers in the space around the cornerstones or the snowballed corners and the circles. I don't know. We'll see. Thank you, Cheryl. Debbie, it's your first time here. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here. Feel free, if you have questions as we go through, feel free to ask. Sometimes I miss the questions. You might have to repeat them because on my phone they go by so quick, right? Same with your comments. But if it's a question for me, if you type it in all caps, that sometimes catches my eye. But y'all, if I miss your question, feel free to repeat it. Feel free to repeat it. And also, pay attention to the chat because a lot of the other people in the chat will answer your question before I even see it, right? I'm going to go ahead and switch the screen over. I want to show you this pattern. Switch the screen over. Beverly, I hope that helps you and that you can get in because there's lots of stuff. There's lots of posts over there already. There's stuff over there already for you. All right, so to get started, here is the 4-page PDF, okay? And it has the basic instructions. I always have a really hard time writing written instructions for doing paper piecing. So I thought this would be a great block to go live with because it's easier for me to show you versus typing it out. But you do have your basic instructions here and then your templates, okay? The circle template you're going to want to cut out. Let me show you what I did with my circle template. I traced it on one layer of freezer paper and make sure to trace your little guidelines in that circle. So I traced it on one layer of freezer paper and then I took 3 other layers. So it's 4 layers of freezer paper altogether and I just pressed it with a hot iron and then I cut out my circle. So this is a nice sturdy template to use once we're done. Once we've paper pieced all the wedges in, we're going to use this. So you're going to cut that out and make a template. And then you're also going to want to cut out this wedge template right on the line, just like this. This is what we are cutting our fabric pieces from. You can use this template to fussy cut from scraps, which would be gorgeous, right? Or you can put together 4, well, you'll actually need 8 pieces, right? I have 8 different fabrics. And so I'm going to be cutting from strips of fabric. This strip of fabric is 5 1/4 inches tall. And I can get several wedges from this one strip. This is 4 layers. I have another set over there. But you can certainly use this template to fussy cut from scraps. And then you're going to need the other template on the back page. The very last page has this template and you'll cut that out on the line and you'll see on the template it says to pre-fold the template before starting. There's 3 lines. You're going to fold it right on the line. Just like that. And they're numbered for each section. So to make the center circle, we're actually making 2 half circles and then joining them once we've done that. So this is what I've done to this point is I've cut out all my templates. And you can see on this back page the 2 examples, one without snowballed corners and one with snowballed corners. I've decided to snowball my corners. And in the instructions, you'll see that I've given 2 suggestions for block sizes. An 8.5 inch block would really showcase the circle. It would fill up the circle a lot more. I've gone with a 10.5 by 10.5 inch background. So here's my background, 10.5 by 10.5. The circle actually measures like 6 3/4. So if you did an 8.5 inch block, the circle would really fill in that block a lot. Okay. When you're printing off your PDF, It would be really helpful to make sure you choose actual size in the printing settings before you print it. And yeah, if you don't have that option when printing PDFs, you might want to download Adobe Reader. You can get that free on the internet. So here's my background. I have my strips of fabric. I have not cut my wedges, so I'm going to show you how I cut my wedges using the little template. And we can move all of this, let's see, all of this over to the side because I've pre-cut my templates. So great. Thank y'all for hanging out with me today. This might not be a quilt or a quilt block that you want to make now, but save it in your mind for down the road. If you're ever, you know how when you watch shows on Netflix and you watch a series for a long time and then it's over and then you're in what they call a show hold? Show hole. Is it a show hole? When you're done with a great big quilt and you're like, I don't know what to do next. This might be the perfect quilt for you. I'm going to trace my template on the back side of the fabric because I think I will see it a lot better. I have 4 layers of fabric here. Again, they're cut 5 1/4 inches tall. Okay, that gives us plenty of room to cut our little templates. What did I do with mine? So here's a template. For 1 pie circle, you're going to need 8 wedges. And I'm just going to use a heat erasing pen and I'm going to cut out 1 set of wedges. I don't need to cut all of these. I'll save that for later. But I'm just going to make my marks just like this, just like that. We'll cut out these 4. I know you probably cannot see those marks, right? They're really faint. They're really faint. I'm going to cut right on that line that I just traced. Here's that. I'm going to line that up and cut just like that. And then I am going to cut that curved edge. Okay. So very carefully, just going to cut that curved edge. This is much easier for me when I stand up. We'll try to do it sitting down. I got a new rotary cutter because mine finally broke. I had a Fisker's rotary cutter for about 8 years. It finally bit the dust. So there's 4 pieces. And I'm going to bring in this other stack of 4 because each one of my pie circles will have 8 different fabrics in it. So let me bring in this other stack of 4. Isn't this fabric gorgeous? I love it. Line it up straight, Lisa. There you go. And it's easier to see from the back side. So I'm going to flip that one over. Again, we're going to trace the template. Just like this. I think this will look like a really old-timey quilt. I'm using tea-stained muslin for my backgrounds, which I think goes with these fabrics so pretty. Makes it really soft looking. So this will be our other 4 pieces. There we go. And I'm going to move this out of the way over there. And then I'm going to cut the little curved edge. I saved my Fiskars rotary cutter. I see that Robin said Fiskars replaces their products that have broken for free. This one, my blade kept going into the side. So there was something wrong with the screw that goes through. I don't know what happened to it, but I might look into that because I saved it. I'll have to look into how to get it replaced. I know that I probably do not have the receipt anymore, so does that matter? It was like 8 years ago. All right, y'all, here are my 8 wedges. The template has built in the seam allowance for you. So you just cut them out to the true size of the template. Goodness, I love these fabrics. They're so pretty. All right, there's my 8 templates, or my 8 fabrics. I know some of you are working with me live today and making this block live, so I'm just going to give it a pause for a second. If you're watching on the replay and you just want to make the block, skip forward till we get started back again. Oh, Robin said you just have to send them a picture of the defective item. Ooh, okay, Robin. Thank you. Thank you. I do like, well, I've used it for 8 years, so I'm so used to the way that it just fits in my hand. And to be really honest, I bought this one yesterday, and it doesn't feel the same. It cuts really great. It cuts wonderfully, but it doesn't feel quite the same. You know, when you get something new, you have to get used to it anyway. But, yeah, it would be nice if I could have, but okay, so my other Fiskars has a gray handle. I don't even know that they make them with the gray handle anymore. It is so great to see y'all. Let me get a sip of this water, and then we're going to start moving on. Okay. Let me warm up my iron because she's been sitting here asleep for a little while. She's been asleep for a little while. I can move that out of the way. Now to do my paper piecing, y'all, I'm going to be using a glue stick. Let me show you the glue stick that I'm using. It is the Elmer's Washable School Glue. It's the clear one. I've transitioned from using the purple glue sticks to the clear, and I'm so much more happy because sometimes the purple would show through my lighter fabrics and would not disappear, which is fine if I was washing the project, but if it was an art quilt that doesn't get washed, I always saw the purple. So I've switched over to clear. It's just an Elmer's glue stick. That's all. You could, of course, pin your pieces to your template if you like. I always like to say that for those who don't want to use the glue. Oh, everybody's coming on in. Hello. Hello, everybody. Let me move this stuff out of the way because we're going to be doing some pressing. So get your iron warmed up. And I don't quite need the background fabric just yet. We're just going to be working with this template pre-folded and our 8 pieces. All right, I hear somebody's car alarm going off next door. Okie doke, y'all. Is anybody totally new to paper piecing? Is this your first time doing a paper pieced project? There are so many different ways to do paper piecing. This is just one of them. And to be really honest, this is my favorite way because I'm not sewing through paper, which I have to rip off my piece when we're done. And I can reuse this template 100 times if I want to. Jean, this is your first time. Karma's first time, Beverly's first time, Daphne's. Yay, Linda's. All right, well, I'm going to walk you through it, okay? And at any point, if you have questions, tell me to stop and we'll go over it. Or you can come back on the replay because if you're like me, seeing it the first time is confusing, but if you come back and rewatch it, then you get it, right? So feel free to come back on the replay, but if you have questions, just tell me to stop. I'm going to try to go slow, okay? I'm going to try, but sometimes it's hard to go slow because I just have no concept of time. Oh, it's a lot of people's first time. All right. Okay, so here's my template. Pre-folded. I fold so that the printed side folds up, okay? Just like that. We're going to take our very first fabric. Let's start with this green one. Our very first fabric, we're going to be putting on the back side of this template with the pretty side facing down. So lay your little wedge, pretty side facing down, just like that, okay? And I find it really helpful for this very first position to line up my paper piece. I'm going to mark my 1/4 inch seam so that I don't really have to eyeball it. So I'm just going to give myself a little guide, just like this. Just like this. And this just helps me not have to eyeball placing my first piece, right? So we've marked a 1/4 inch on the back side. We're taking our paper template. We're going to add a little bit of this glue stick right in that first position. It just takes a little bit. All right, and we're going to line up this first wedge right in those marks that we just made. And just push that down just like that. And the glue stick will hold that piece of fabric there just like that. Then we're going to bring in our second fabric. Here's our second. So our first is pretty side down. All of the remaining fabrics will be pretty side up when we add them. So I'm going to fold my paper template on the pre-folded line just like that. And I'm going to match up the raw edges on the right side. Just like that. See how they're all lined up, those two pieces? We're going to bring this over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew right next to the paper edge. We're not sewing on the paper, but we're going to lower the needle right next to that paper edge and we're going to sew all the way down that seam. Okay? So I'm holding both pieces with my finger just like this. We're going to bring it over to the sewing machine. Okie dokie. So here's both pieces and our template. I'm going to line that up so that my needle comes right next to that paper fold. And we're going to sew right down next to it. Can you see that? I think you can see that. All righty. So I'm using white thread, so you probably cannot see my stitch line, but it's stitched. Before we even open this up, I'm going to take my glue stick I'm going to put a little bit of glue in position number 2, just like that. It just takes a little bit. We're going to flip over position number 2, just like this. Finger press that seam, just like that. And then we're going to give that a press, just like this. Cindy, I'm using an open toe foot so that you can see where my needle is a little bit better. With my regular pressing foot, it's a little bit hard to see my needle right next to the paper. I would suggest maybe using your regular pressing foot, but I thought you might be able to see better if I used my open toe foot. So there's our first 2 pieces. We're going to fold this paper template on the next line just like this. At this point, you're going to have this little tag at the halfway mark. I'm going to take my pair of scissors and I'm just going to cut that little tag off because it creates a little bit of bulk in that seam. Nice and straight with that seam. You only have this little tag right in the halfway mark. So this is what it looks like on the back side. We're going to bring in our 3rd fabric. So there's fabric number 3. We're going to match up these raw edges, just like this. You want to make sure that your fabric extends beyond the top of your circle, okay? We will trim that off in a little bit. Match up your raw edges, and we're going to sew that seam. Coming back, we are going to put some glue stick in position number 3, just like that. We're going to open up that 3rd fabric. Finger press it right on over and then press that. And then we only have one more fabric to add, and that's fabric number 4. So we're going to fold over position number 4. And let's see, let's bring in this one. We're going to match up these raw edges, just like that. And again, we're going to sew right next to the paper edge. Back and forth. You're going to do a lot of back and forth, back and forth. So it would be really helpful if you have your sewing machine and a little pressing table set up so that you're back and forth and you don't have to get up. Well, you might want to get up if you need a lot of movement in your day. Paper piecing is a lot of movement. To the machine, press, cut, to the machine, press, cut. I've put a little bit of glue stick in position number 4. We're going to open this fabric up and press that. Oop, look, I used the same fabric twice. Oh well. I wanted all of my wedges to be different, but I must have grabbed 2 strips that were the same. Okay. All right, so here is our first half circle. We're going to do all of these steps one more time because we need one other half circle to complete this block. Before we remove our paper template, we're going to do a little bit of trimming though. Okay, so don't immediately rip off your paper. We're going to trim this up just a little bit. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you. Before we remove this, we're just going to double check and trim up this bottom straight edge to 1/4 of an inch. So anything that extends beyond 1/4 of an inch, we're going to trim that off. Just like that. It was just a little tiny bit. And then we're going to trim all the extra fabric that goes along that curve. Okay. So very carefully, just trim away all of the extra. It does not have to be perfect because y'all, this circle has a turned edge. So you're not going to see it if you don't get it exactly perfect. Just like that. So there's the little extra there. And at this point, when you're all nice and trimmed, you can remove the paper template. And see how easy that comes off? We get to reuse this over and over again. And here's our first half circle. Isn't that so pretty? I'm going to put that off to the side. We've got one more to make. Thank you, Janet. Thank you. Yeah, Jill, get yourself a little pressing table or something that sits right next to your machine so that you can just go back and forth, just turning. Cindy said, you are brave to use a rotary cutter on that curve. You can certainly use a pair of scissors and cut that extra part off if you want. Definitely. All right, so we need another half circle. We're going to repeat the whole thing over again. I'm going to bring in our first fabric and we're going to turn that one pretty side down. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make myself a little guide. And you really only need to do this on the first piece to help you line up your template. Just marking myself a 1/4 inch, just like this. Just like that. That helps me line up my first template piece. I'm going to take position number 1 and put a little bit of glue stick. Just like that. It just takes a little bit. And we're going to line up position number 1 with the guides that we just made. So you don't have to really eyeball it. Make sure you have fabric extending outside of your circle, the curved edge. I do, Dari. I have a video on how I made my pressing board. It's just it was like a 3/4 inch piece of plyboard. And then I wrapped a towel around it. And right now I have a piece of flannel on top of it, but you can take it off and wash it. All right, so our first fabric is glued onto our template. We're going to bring in fabric number 2. We're going to fold this paper template back on the first line and match up these fabrics. Fabric number 2 is pretty side up. We're going to match up those fabrics like that and bring that over to the sewing machine. And let me, there. This will be a lot less moving back and forth. I wanted you to see kind of closer up the first time we did the half circle. All right, so we are sewing right next to the paper edge from one side to the other. We're coming back. We're going to put some glue stick in position number 2. Then we're going to open up fabric number 2 and press that right in place. What I love about paper piecing is it gives you such precise work without having to be precise. I'm a huge fan of paper piecing. So there's our second fabric. We're going to fold that over, and just like the first time, in the halfway mark, we have that little tag, and I just cut that tag off, just like this. It just reduces a lot of the bulk right in the center of that circle. We're going to bring in fabric number 3. We're going to line up the fabrics just like this. And we're going to sew right next to the paper fold. Bring it back over, add some glue stick to position number 3. Flip over fabric number 3 and press. Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, my shirt. My son gave me this shirt for Christmas. Friends is one of my favorite series to watch, and The Office. So yeah, he got me this shirt for Christmas. I love it. All right, we have our 4th fabric. We're going to line everything up. Just like that. And this is our last seam for this half circle. I'm going to switch back over to this because we're done with the sewing machine for a little while. I'm going to add glue to that 4th position. We're going to open up that fabric just like this and press that nice and flat. The heat from the iron dries that glue stick so fast, so all this glue is dry. The first time that you wash your quilt, all of this glue stick is going to wash right out. So there's our half circle. Before we remove our paper template, we're just going to double check and trim away anything that's going past that 1/4 inch seam allowance. It's usually just a little tag in the center and maybe a sliver of fabric. Just like that. And then you can use scissors if you want. We're going to trim right along that curved edge. Just like that. Like that. I'm going to tell you, we were watching a show on Netflix. I think the name of it was, well, right now we're watching Rectify, which I am really loving that show. Forget the one we watched before that, but they had a quilt on the wall. It was a wall quilt, and it was in their dining room, and it had circles, different sized circles on that quilt. The circles were divided by 4. Once you've trimmed, you can take your paper template off. So each one of the circles, it looked like this, okay? 4 different fabrics in a circle like this, and their circles were all different sizes and just appliqued to a square wall quilt, and I loved it. It was so gorgeous. So that's really what inspired this quilt block, but I wanted to add more wedges to my circles. But that's where the inspiration for this block came from. Do you have 3 cameras? I have 1, 2, 3, 4 cameras. The webcam on my computer acts as my 4th camera. Where can we post our projects that you've taught us without Facebook? Jill, if you don't have Facebook, but you want to send me pictures, you can send them to my email at lisacapenquilts@gmail.com. Or this is really great because I have several people who don't do Facebook, but they want to share pictures with me. They use the Etsy app. So in the description box down below, there's a link to my Etsy shop, and you can click on that and go over there, and you can send me a message with pictures right through Etsy. So yeah, if you don't have Facebook, that's 2 different ways you can get in touch with me. Jill, rectify. I'm in season 2. All right, so here's our 2 half circles. Y'all, if we flip 1 half circle over, it should just measure up and line up perfectly. Just like that, because we've trimmed it right to that paper template. I'm going to use 2 pins to keep this together. I'm going to put one up here. I'm just going to make sure those points are meeting in the center. And I'm going to put one right here. That way I don't have to remove it while I'm sewing. But this is going to hold those 2 circles, or 2 half circles, in place. Now I'm going to switch my foot over. We're going to use a 1/4 inch seam, and we're going to sew this circle right together. Right together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I will remove my open toe foot, put on my regular pressing foot, and set a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You could use your regular pressing foot for all of this. It's just I wanted you to be able to see what I was doing next to the paper fold. All right, we're going to just sew this with a 1/4 inch seam. Can take those pins out. Now before we open this up, there's a couple little things that I like to do right in that center, and I wish I would have used dark thread so that you could see this. But if you're making this block and you're at this point, if you hold it up close, you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. We have a seam from joining it, these 2 pieces, that comes to this edge. We're going to take and just pull those stitches out or clip them right up to the stitch where we joined the 2 circles, right? Then we have this middle seam. We're just going to clip that one too, or just pull those stitches right out. We're going to do it on that side. We're going to flip it over, and again, we have the seam right in the middle that comes to the edge. We're just going to pull those stitches out, and then this seam here, that's going to help this seam lay a little bit more flat because we have 8 fabrics coming right into that center point. That's going to give us a pretty thick little center, right? Because everything's meeting right there. But if you clip those seams, it's not going to be completely flat, but it's going to help a lot. See how perfect that is with paper piecing? Look at that. It's gorgeous. This seam where we join the circle, I am going to press open. I'm going to press it open. I'm just going to put my finger right in that circle and just squish it down and open this seam up. Just like that. And we're going to give her a good press. Can you see that? I'm going to move this over. I don't like using a lot of steam next to my cutting mat. Thank you, Mimsy, for posting the link to my Etsy shop. If you don't do Facebook, go over to Etsy and you can send me pictures right through there. You can use Etsy like a messaging app. All right, right in that center, I'm going to give a couple bursts of steam, so I might fog up the camera. I think this steam helps that center lay a little bit flatter. And then I'm going to press it from the front. Oh, she's so pretty. She's so pretty. A little tap of a hammer on that seam will flatten it out too. I looked for a clapper at Joann's. I'm going to have to go to a quilt shop or get Harlan to make me one because I didn't see any there. Thank you, Doris. Hey, Jackie, come on in. All right, y'all. Look how pretty she is. Even if she is repeating two of the same fabrics. She's still pretty. So you could certainly treat this like a raw edge applique and put this right down onto your background fabric and do it like you would any raw edge applique. But for this one, I want a finished edge so that the edges of the fabric do not fray. Okay, so we're going to turn it to the back side. We're going to use the template that's on page 3, I think it was. And I've already cut mine out. In the beginning, I said this is 4 layers of freezer paper with the lines that are on the template traced to the circle. We're going to be using this and a needle and some thread. So let me just thread one of these needles. I like these longer needles, although they're kind of thick. For this part, I'm just using a cotton thread. This is an Aurifil gray thread. This is actually my thread for my hexies that I took out of my kit because I'm getting some dark thread for that kit. And the thread is really light gray. I know you probably can't see it too well. But I'm just going to thread my needle. If I can see it, there we go. We're going to be pulling on this thread, so I like to double up my thread and make a knot at the end. If you've ever made yo-yos, this is going to be just like making yo-yos. We're going to be doing a hand stitch all the way around the perimeter of the circle and then pulling on this thread. So whatever thread you use, you want it to be nice and strong. It's going to tie a knot at the very end. Just like that. There's my little knot. Mary, I do use OBS. Yes, I do. It helps me switch the screens around. You can add pictures and all kinds of stuff. All right, I'm going to start. I'm going to do some small stitches all the way around, just a smidgen away from that raw edge. And one thing I've noticed, just like when making yo-yos, the smaller your stitches, the more precise the edge of your circle is going to be. If you do great big stitches, sometimes that curved edge on your circle has little notches in it. Oh, I don't know if notch is the right word for it, but it's less perfect if you use a bigger stitch. So the smaller stitch when doing this part, the better. And I just go back and forth, back and forth. Pull the thread through and just repeat this whole process all the way around. So this is actually part of the process that you could get several of these circles to this point, and then when you're watching TV at night, you could sit and do this part, right? You don't have to sit at your sewing machine for this part. Hazel said yo-yos with a question mark. Hazel, I know that you probably know what a yo-yo is if you saw it. Google yo-yo quilt. And you'll be like, oh yeah, okay, I know what yo-yos are. I'm trying to go quick. If you're watching on the replay, you get the idea and you can fast forward, but for everybody who's here live, hang tight. Now would be a great time to go grab a drink or a snack, because I'm not that fast at this part. And because I've used a gray thread, you can't really see my stitches very well at all. I was going to switch to a darker thread for the video, but these are all the threads that I've used in the other 7 blocks, and I want everything to be consistent and the same. So I was like, okay, we're just going to deal with the lighter thread for the video. Like that. And I wish I could tell y'all we were almost done, but I'm just like barely halfway there. Back and forth. Back and forth, back and forth. While we're doing this, I guess we could chit chat. Y'all, we're going to be doing a series throughout this year called Meet the Crew. If you're in the Creative Crew on Facebook, I would love to feature you in a live video. We can set up the screen to where we'll see me and you. We'll ask a couple questions like, how long have you been quilting or crafting? What's your favorite techniques of your craft? Like for me, it's applique. Applique is one of my favorite quilting techniques. And then you can show us some of your projects that you've made, like a little trunk show. And you can show us around your studio. And we're going to do it live. We're going to do it live. And we're going to do the live over here on YouTube so that the videos are really easy to find, because videos can be tricky to find over on Facebook. So, yes, keep your eyes out for that. I'm actually really excited about that. You can show us all your creative solutions for storing fabric and gadgets. You could show us how you're set up with your sewing machine and pressing board. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But that's going to be an ongoing series through this year. So it'll have its own playlist. So everybody's video will be in the same place here on YouTube. All right, guess what? I made it all the way around. Here's where we started. I just did a stitch beyond the knot. So there we are. You'll see the edges start curling up around the edge, just like this. Dari, I already know. I've jotted you down on the list that you want to do that. I've jotted you down. All right, so with our paper template, you could use cardboard if you want. There's my circle. We're going to line up these guidelines to the seams so that we get this circle pretty well centered to this circle, right? So we have the seam going through the middle. I'm just going to use those guides just like this. It's going to help me center my circle like this and that. And now we're going to pull on this thread. It's going to pull the edges of our circle right around, just like that. That's why you want to use a good strong thread, one that's not going to break when you pull on it. We're going to pull the edges nice and tight around that template. And while it's nice and tight, we're going to tie this into a knot, okay? Just like this. I usually go through there a couple times, do like a triple knot. Once you get it pressed, it doesn't much matter, right? But I just want to go through there a few times and secure that really well, just like that. And then we can trim and get that out of the way. Yeah, it's like magic, right? Perfect seam. Let's flip her over. Isn't she so pretty? Let's warm up this iron again. We're going to give her a nice good press. Usually when I press this seam at this point, I use a little starch. I just spray a light coat of starch on here, but my starch is across the room. I just realized that. But usually I will just put a little starch on there. We're going to press the seam. The starch will also help with the pressing of the seam. Doris, you're so sweet. I don't know that I would say I'm perfect, but I do think I'm getting better at doing the lives, right? I have improved since we started doing the lives. I'm nowhere close to where I want to be, but I'm much better than I used to be. Wanda, yeah, you could do the same thing with your hexies too. Oh, I want to go ahead and press it from the front too. Let's press it from the front. All right, and when that cools off, we're going to remove the paper templates. Bye, Dort. Have a great day. Linda said, do you remember what your first live video was? Let me think a second. I know I went live showing how to crop photos using Inkscape. That might have been my first live here on YouTube. I went live on Facebook way before I ever went live here on YouTube. So thank you, Janet. Yeah, Kathy, I think using starch really helps a lot. Mine is over there, and I don't want to get up. But it certainly helps a lot. You're so welcome, Circle. All right, so once it's cool, you can just reach in and grab the circle. And just pull that right out. Just like that. You're going to keep this template and reuse it. You're going to flatten out your little seams just like that. I'm going to press this one more time. Just like that. There she is. A little finished circle. Diane, I think so too. Not everybody likes the format of a live, right? Not everybody likes to sit and listen to all the interaction, but I love it. I love it. So in the 4-page PDF, I mentioned that you could use a couple of different sizes for the background, and it's going to give you a different looking quilt for sure. The background I've chosen to use is 10.5 by 10.5. So it gives me a little bit more negative space around my circle, right? So there's my circle like that. Now you could certainly use just this as your block. And that would be gorgeous. And like we talked about in the very beginning, it would give you so much negative space to do some really fantastic quilting around the circles. And on page 4, I give you a little bit of an idea of what it would look like if you just put your blocks together like that. I also give you the idea of what it would look like if you snowballed your corners. Okay, so this is what I've decided to do with mine to sort of eat up a little bit of that negative space, and it gives my quilt a different look, right? So we're going to go ahead and snowball the corners just in case you want to see how that's done. The snowballs, you can cut any size, and changing the size of your snowballs is going to change the look of your block, okay? For the snowballs in my particular quilt, I've decided to go with, or start with, a square that's 3.5 by 3.5. You can make your snowballs any size you want. Doing it smaller would give you more negative space to do some fantastic quilting, right? You could make them bigger and your snowballs would be really close to your circle, right? For my quilt, I've decided to go with a 3.5 by 3.5. So I have 4 squares that are cut and ready to go. You could just fold them in half on the diagonal and give them a press, but it's just as easy. Where's my pen? I'm just going to take a pen. I'm going to make a mark from corner to corner on each one of these, and this is going to be my sewing line. Right on the back side of the fabric, just like that. To be really honest, I have an easier time seeing the mark like this versus pressing my square in half. I have an easier time following a mark that's drawn onto the fabric, but that's just me. So for all 4 squares, there's our diagonal mark. We're going to line them up on our background squares, so it doesn't matter what size your background square is. It doesn't matter what size your snowball square is. We're going to line up the raw edges of our square to the raw edges of our background, and we're going to sew from edge to edge, and we're going to do this for all 4 corners. Okay? All right, I'm going to switch you over to the sewing machine. I'm going to bring these pieces over and I'm going to go add, make sure you can see that. I'm going to add the 4 snowballs. We're sewing right on that line that we just drew. There's our first one. Oh, I lost my little tag. We'll bring in our second one. Match up those raw edges. We were Zooming the other night on the creative crew, and Miss Linda was saying that while her snowballs are on, she'll go ahead and sew another 1/4 inch seam and then end up with half square triangles in the end, because we're going to be trimming away a good portion of this. So when she trims off her extra fabric, she ends up with half square triangles that are already made. That's our third one. And this is the last one. All righty. We have snowballed the corners. We're just going to trim away the extra. We're going to make sure to leave a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just like that. We're going to do that for all 4 corners. So there's that one. And there's that one. So of course, I save all these little triangles. Nothing goes to waste. I'm going to save those. And now we're just going to press these little triangles that are left open just like that. Ooh, Wanda has a lunch date. Oh, fantastic lunch. I am hungry. I am hungry. What are y'all having for lunch today? I think I'm going to have leftovers. Yay, Karen said, I have quilted for more than 20 years and you just keep showing me new methods. Thanks. Certainly, I did not invent this method, Karen, but I love it. And I'm so glad I was able to share it and you got to see it for the first time. Certainly, I didn't invent snowballing the corners, but it's one of my favorite things to do because look how simple that is. And just like that, we've pieced in triangles in our corners. It's brilliant. And it's so quick and so fast. So that is how we are looking now. There we go. So all we really have left to do is to center this circle right in the middle of our block, because I've used a 10.5-inch background piece. I know that the center of my block is 5 1/4 both ways, right? So I'm just going to take a disappearing pin and a ruler. I'm going to mark over 5 1/4. Just give myself a guide to go by, just like that. On 2 sides. This is going to help me center up my circle right in the middle. So now I can take my 2 seams that go right through the middle, and I can line them up to those guides like this, and pretty much center that circle right in the middle. Now, if you like to use pins, you could pin your circle in place. I'm using some glue. How would you sew the leftovers you cut off as a half square triangle? Well, Linda sews them while they're still on her block, but I just want to get my block done and move on with it. So I'm left with a bunch of these triangle pieces. You would just line them up just like this, and sew right on that diagonal with a 1/4-inch seam allowance, sorry. And then when you open them up, you'd have a half square triangle block. So I save all these, but I don't know that I'll ever do it, but I save them. All right, so I'm gonna just hold this in place now that it's centered on my background. I'm gonna flip this over, and I'm just gonna add a few glue dots right on that folded seam on my circle, like that. Press that down and flip over the other side. Just like this. And it just really takes just a little bit of glue, like that, like that. And I'm going to dry that glue with a hot iron, just like this. Aw, Karen says she lives by herself. You do exist. You do. I'm so glad you're here. Connie, doesn't that look like such a pretty little pie? Isn't that so pretty? I'm sorry, I was off the screen. I'm just pressing that glue dry. Just like that. You could use pins. You don't have to glue it. But I've just used a little bit of glue. The glue is now dry. I can bring this over to the sewing machine and sew. So when you get to this point, y'all, there's so many different things you could do. You could hand sew your circle to the background. You don't have to use your sewing machine at all. Or you could do a straight stitch right inside the circle all the way around. That would be so quick and easy, right? I was half tempted to make all my blocks just like this and put together my quilt top and then stitch down my blocks with my long arm while I'm doing the quilting. I was half tempted to do it that way. But I've used a blanket stitch. You could use a blanket stitch, a zigzag stitch, a satin stitch if you wanted to. I would really stabilize this a lot if you want to use a satin stitch because it's really dense, right? But you could do that. Any of the decorative stitches in your sewing machine would work. I've chosen to do a blanket stitch. You know what? We'll go ahead and do that part just so you can see and so we can hang out for a little bit longer. Da-da-da-da, sewing machine. Let's switch it over. I'm going to switch back to my open toe foot, so maybe you can see a little bit better. And the thing is, because I'm using a light thread, you might not even see it at all. But let's go through the motions anyway. And it'll give us a chance to hang out for just a few more minutes. I like to use my open toe foot anyway when I'm doing the blanket stitch, because I like to see what I'm doing, right? Ooh, where's my note card? I'll be right back. I did have to get up anyways. When I started this quilt, at the very beginning, on an index card, I wrote down all of my machine settings so that I would not forget, because I don't plan on making this quilt all at one time. There's going to be periods of time when I'm working on it and not working on it, and I did not want to forget. I wanted my blanket stitch to look the same on all of my blocks from here on out. So on an index card that will stay with this project, I've written down which stitch number I've used in my machine, the width and the length, so that all of my blocks look the same. So for this one, I've used a blanket stitch. I set it at 3.8 for the width, 3.8, and for the length, I went with 4.0. There's no way I would remember that. There's no way I would remember that. So now the blanket stitch is going to look the same as the rest of my blocks. And I'm just going to do a blanket stitch all the way around. This is usually when I have music going on and it's like mindless sewing. You just want to stay, on the edge of the circle and sew all the way around. This is relaxing sewing for me. I am in love with these fabrics. I'm going to tell you what. They are so pretty. Just sewing all the way around. It just takes a minute, depending on whatever stitch you used. We're coming back to the start. And just like that, we did our blanket stitch. Isn't that so pretty? You can really see it if I hold it up like that on the red fabric. It's so pretty. So there we go. There is our block all finished. What color thread? For this particular quilt, I am using a white YLI thread. It's basically an all-purpose thread. It's the YLIUU thread. It is a polyester thread. And it's actually the same thread that my long arm loves. It's one of the two threads that I found that my long arm loves to use, but I also use it for piecing. That's the thread I'm using to put together this quilt and do the blanket stitch. Dari, can you see my music playlist on YouTube? Can you see that? I thought that was private. I didn't know you could see my playlist for music. That's funny. Some songs on one of my playlists may contain bad words, just letting you know. I didn't write the song. I don't know which playlist that is, but it may have some bad words in the songs. Where do you find the thread? YLI thread can be found, let's see, online. If you Google search YLI, they have a website you can order from. You can also find a few colors of it on Amazon. Some of your quilt shops might carry it, like Memory Lane Quilting in Ohio. That they're the people who I bought my long arm from. They carry all the colors of YLI. So you can search Memory Lane Quilting. It's a quilt shop in Ohio. They carry it. It's been so great to spend some time with y'all. What do you think about this block? I love it. I love paper piecing because there's no way I would have pieced this circle to be so perfect without paper piecing. It just wouldn't have turned out the same. But I think it's just so pretty. Well, let's flip it. There we go. It's just so pretty. And of course, I did not put on the 4-page PDF fabric requirements for making a quilt. So if you have the app, the Robert Kaufman Quilt Calculating app, it's a free app. You could type in that quilt calculator, how big you want your quilt to be, right? Type in the measurements of your background block and the size of the quilt that you want to make. It's going to tell you how much yardage you would need of your background fabric. That's a great way to figure out yardage depending on the size of the quilt that you want to make. I've decided I'm going to make 63 of these blocks. So my quilt, let's see. Oh, my calculator's on my phone. It's going to be 7 blocks in a row. And then 9 rows down, 63 blocks for my quilt. It's going to be like a twin, I think. If I did the math again, I forget. But of course, you could just keep on going and keep on making them until you make a king size quilt, right? Or you could just put 4 together and make a lovely little wall quilt, which I think would be adorable. Yes, Katrina, you could figure out the borders. It'll tell you how much binding fabric you need, all of that stuff. It'll tell you how much backing fabric, how much batting. You just type in the measurements of your quilt and it does everything for you. Free app called the Robert Kaufman. What fabric line is this? Mimsy, I'm going to pull up the salvage edges because I think it's a couple different fabrics. Let me grab that bag real quick. I'm keeping every little bit of this fabric. So I have these salvage edges. Let's take a look. And of course, not all of them have the fabric line on there. Garden Delights 2 by Gray Sky Studio. Isn't that pretty? Garden Delights 2. That one just says cotton. That one didn't have anything on it. Neither did that one. These were all fat quarters. So she had already pre-cut a ton of fat quarters and they were all lined up in a box on a table. So I did not get to see the bolts that they came from. Wyndham Fabrics presents Storybook V1. What is the Roman numeral V1? There's that one. This is also another Wyndham Fabrics. That one didn't have anything on it. That one doesn't. That one doesn't. Playdate by Nancy Mahoney. Playdate. I'm going to tell you, I had fun picking out fat quarters. She had 4 tables laid out, and one whole table were all of these fat quarters. I just thought that they were so pretty. Let's see, Aunt Grace 15 Anniversary Collection 2006 from the collection of Judy Rothermel. Oh, I mess up names, y'all. For Marcus Brother Textiles. I'm going to hold that up close so that you can see it. Let's see if I have any other ones. See, I just love that. I don't know, there's something about it. It just reminds me of something like from being a kid or something. I don't know. Wyndham Fabrics presents Storybook 8. I think that says 8. Pattern number 31828. And I have one more stack here. These are all of the salvages from the fabrics I've used so far. Garden Delights 2. I think that's a repeat. Playdate by Mahoney. Nancy Mahoney. Yep, that's it. I hope that gives you an idea, or at least a starting point, so that if you want to find any of these fabrics, it leads you in some kind of right direction. Mimsy, I can give my email out. I don't mind giving my email. It's not my personal email, it's my business email. So lisacapenquilts@gmail.com. That's my business email. Sheila, the store was in Westminster, Vermont. Westminster. You know what? Let's give them a shout out. I want to tell you. Let's do screen sharing for a second. Let's go find them. I don't think they have a website, but there is a phone number if you want to call them up. There was a phone number. Let's head on over to the interwebs. Quilt. Quilt. Quilt shops in Vermont. There's several of them, but I'm going to show you which one it was. And they have a phone number. So if you called her and said, hey, I saw some vintage looking fabrics. They were fat quarters on a table. They would probably know exactly what you're talking about. That's not the website I went to the other day. You all. I've been to several of these quilt shops, y'all, but the one that I got these fabrics from was in Westminster, Quilt Away Fabrics. And here is their phone number, 802-722-4743. That's their phone number. It was an awesome quilt shop to go to. And yes, they were fat quarters all laid out on a table. And let them know which ones you want. And I'm sure that they would mail them to you if you can't find them any other place. I don't know the people who own this shop. And I've just been there once, but she was so helpful and so friendly. And yes, they're gorgeous, gorgeous fabrics. There's the phone number. And if you're ever up that way, I suggest stopping in. It's a little bit off the beaten path, but in Vermont really isn't everything. So it was a nice drive getting there. And then, you know, we turned down a couple little roads and I'm like, I don't know that we're going in the right place, but bam, then there's a quilt shop. And you're like, whoa, we're here. Quilt Away Fabrics. That's where I got the fabrics from. So have I missed any questions? This is my first time watching live. May I know how many fat quarters do we need to make this quilt? Sanda, hi. I'm going to mess up your name. I know that, and I'm so sorry. You know what? I got like 30 fat quarters, but I'm only using about 15. It's going to depend on how big you want to make your quilt and how many repeats of the fabrics that you want to do, right? I did not give fabric requirements for the quilt because you might want to do quilts that are different sizes. So I recommend getting the free app, the Robert Kaufman app, and then punching in the numbers for the size quilt that you want to make, and that'll tell you approximately how much fabric you need. Linda says, how many for this quilt? How many blocks? I'm making 63, but you could only make 4 and make it into a wall quilt, right? I'm making 63. So my quilt is going to be like 70 by 90 because I've made a 10-inch block. It'll finish at 10 inches. The Robert Kaufman app, Miss Kimberly. You know what? I'm going to show you on my phone. I'm going to miss your comments for a little bit. Let's go take a look at my Robert Kaufman app. Do you know how you want to quilt it? I've been thinking about that, Sheila. It's been something that's going through my mind while I'm making the blocks. Let me exit out of YouTube for a second. I'm not going to see your comments. Here is my cell phone. I'm going to go to my apps. We're going to look for the Robert Kaufman app. If you go to your app store and type in Robert Kaufman, the little icon is going to look like this. It's got an R and a K on it. It's called a quilting calculator. We're going to open that up. So let's say I want to know how much yardage to buy so that all of my backgrounds are the same. And I want to go buy some yardage. And I want to buy enough while I'm there, right? So that I get all the same fabric. I know that I want to make 63 quilt blocks, okay? We're going to go to pieces to yardage area. We're going to type in the width of the fabric. So this fabric was 44 inches wide. It'll tell you, you could bring this right to the store, look on the end of the bolt, and it's going to tell you how wide your fabric is. We're going to say this one's 44 inches wide. How many pieces do you want to cut? Well, I know I want to make 63 blocks. And what are the dimensions of the pieces you want to cut? Well, I'm cutting mine at 10.5 by 10.5. And then you hit calculate. And it's going to tell you, and I know it's fuzzy because it's focused for this. It tells you you need 4.667 yards of fabric. Or 4 2/3, depending on how you cut your pieces, right? I always go with the larger number, and then I round up because I like to put a little fabric in my stash at the end. So I'm going to buy 5 yards of fabric. That's going to allow, you know, if I mess up a block, I'm going to have maybe enough to do another set, right? I like to round up and then keep what's left over. So I bought 5 yards of tea stain muslin for my quilt. Now, let's figure out pieces to yardage area, or the piece count. Let's go to piece count. Let's figure out how many of these wedges you can get from a fat quarter. You want to do that? Let me bring in that little template. Where is my template? Here it is. Let's do a rectangle measurement, right? This template we cut at 5 1/4. Let's round up and say 4 by 5 1/4. That's the size of piece of fabric you need to cut one wedge, right? Size of pieces to be cut, 4 by 5.25. Size of the fabric to be cut from. A fat quarter is like what, 18 by 22 inches, right? I think that's a fat quarter. So it's going to tell you, you can get 16 of these wedges from one fat quarter. So if that gives you an idea of how many fat quarters you need for this quilt, you can get 16 of these wedges from one fat quarter. You need 8 wedges to do one block. So basically, one fat quarter will do 2 circles, right? So that's the Robert Kaufman app. It'll figure out your binding. It'll figure out how much backing fabric you need, how much binding you need. Let's pull this video back up so I can read your comments again. And skip the ad. There we go. Your circle template was made with parchment paper, freezer paper. Parchment paper isn't made exactly the same as freezer paper, and when freezer paper has like a plastic coating on it, so when you press it to fabric or to other paper, it sticks. So freezer paper, 4 layers of freezer paper bonded together makes up the circle template. Where did I move that to? I moved everything out of the way, and now I can't find anything. There we go. That's 4 layers of freezer paper. I think that's all the questions. If I've missed your question, I am so sorry. Yeah, there's certainly so many possibilities for this block, right? My whole purpose of today's video is really to share the idea. In the 4-page pattern, there's a couple suggestions for block size, right? But you could change that up. You could even print this off smaller, right? And make a smaller circle. You could enlarge this and make a bigger one. You would have to maybe tape the sections together, right? But you could do that if you wanted to make this bigger. And then the other part of this video was to walk through the steps on how to do the paper piecing and then put the block together with the snowballed corners if you want to do that. Arlene said, if the block is large, will the quilt be completed faster? Yes. Yes. I was going to go with a smaller circle and a smaller block, like a 6-inch, because I think that would be gorgeous. But that's so much work. And a 10-inch block is going to go together pretty quickly. It's going to go together pretty quickly. But if you made it even bigger, you're just going to have less repeats of the circle, right? You're going to have less circles because they're going to take up more room in your quilt. But most certainly a bigger block will go together faster. Linda, I haven't decided if I'm going to use the sashing. I kind of love the way that without the sashing, the snowballed corners come together and form a diamond. And I've laid it out on my wall, and I kind of really love that. Let me put 4 out together so that you can see. I kind of love the way that it forms that diamond in the middle. And if you add a sashing, it's going to break up that diamond a little bit. But who knows? That might look really pretty too. But I kind of really love that. And if you put these blocks on point, instead of a diamond, it's going to make a square. So if you put your blocks on point, I'm trying to, I have too much stuff on my table. If you put them on point, of course, you're going to need less blocks, right, to make the quilt. And your snowballs are going to form a square, just like that, which is kind of fantastic too, right? Sherry, okay, the other day, Sherry, you said you and Harlan would be our brother and sister from another mother. He said the exact same thing too. I had these blocks up on my wall, and he was like, ooh, because, you know, he gets into this stuff, y'all. He's like, I really like that stitch. What is that stitch you used? I said, it's a blanket stitch. Doesn't it look so pretty? He's like, it does. You should do a blanket stitch on all of those seams. And I was like, no, that's too much work. But he was right. It would be gorgeous. You're right, Sherry. A blanket stitch. And so then I thought, well, maybe I'll put this together as a 4-patch and then do a blanket stitch. That'll go by faster. It would look gorgeous. But I'm like, yeah, that's a little bit more work. He said the same thing. Dawn said, sashing with cornerstones. That would be gorgeous, Dawn. That would be gorgeous. It would break up those snowballs a little bit, but it would form something that looks totally different. That would be pretty. So yeah, I haven't quite decided, but more than likely, I'm going to put it together with my blocks side by side and my rows side by side and get that little diamond because I kind of like that. I like the simplicity of it. It's very simple. And that's the other thing. Sylvia said, if the block is on point, what would you put in the corners to square it up? You know what? I'd probably put patches of some of this fabric in the corners. I don't know. I hadn't thought too much about it because I more than likely won't put these blocks on point. But I would probably cut a triangle of one of these pretty fabrics and put that in the corners. I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how that would look. I don't know. It would probably be either just a triangle of my background or a triangle of one of these. I don't know. But I think this is gorgeous. It's so pretty. Anyway, if you want to follow along in the progress of this quilt, whenever I make more blocks and I'm able to, I'm going to take pictures. I'll post those pictures over on my Lisa Capen Quilts Facebook page, so keep an eye out for that. Bye, Miss Valeria. Bye, everyone who's leaving. Thank y'all so much for hanging out with me today. Just saying. The Creative Squad over on Patreon, they got this pattern like 3 or 4 days ago. So they've been able to follow me over there. And so they got this PDF a few days ago. But the link is down in the description box if you want to print this out. Maybe you wanted to watch to see how complicated it was before you printed it out. But if you followed along, then you saw how it's pretty simple. And once you do it 1 or 2 times, the paper piecing part, you really get it. So I know lots of y'all said this was going to be your first time paper piecing. I really encourage you to try it and do a couple of blocks because it really takes 1 or 2 to get the whole flipping back and forth thing down. But once you do, you're going to be like, whoa, this is so simple. And I think you're going to fall in love with paper piecing. So I highly encourage you to try it. Try it just on a couple blocks. And let me know what you think. Ooh, Margaret said, how about a half block? A half block I think that would work too, Margaret. I think you're talking about putting it on point. I think that would work. Kathy said, I just tuned in just now. Yeah, you'll be able to watch this on the replay. It might take a couple minutes for the video to process after we're live, but you'll be able to come back and watch the replay. Barbara, right? These fabrics are gorgeous. They're so pretty. They're so pretty. I love them so much. All right, everybody. Words are hard. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. More than anything, you might not even want to make this block. You might be like, I hate paper piecing. Stay tuned for next week because we'll do something totally different. And if you haven't subscribed, maybe this is your first time here. If you just popped in. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you do that and you hit the bell notification and select all because you'll get notified when I go live and you'll get notified when I release regular videos too. All the ways to get in touch with me are down in the description box. I would love to see your blocks if you make them. So please find a way to send them to me and because I would love to see what you've done. Have a fantastic week, everybody. Ooh, Patreon, Creative Squad. We're doing our very first Zoom together on Saturday. It's a date. Don't forget we're Zooming on Saturday evening. I'm so excited about it. Doris said, could you do half circles in the corners? If so, what size could I use? Doris, Robert Kaufman app. We'll figure that out for you. It does set in triangles. You just punch in your background, size block you're doing. It'll tell you how big to make your triangles. It does all that tricky math for you. All right, y'all. I've had so much fun. I'm off to go buy some sashing fabric for the quilt behind me. I'll be shopping and sewing for the rest of the day. But first, I'm going to eat some lunch because I'm so hungry. Thank y'all so much for hanging out with me. I will see y'all all next week if I don't see you before then. Bye, everybody. Let's find the little button to push. Where are we? Okay. Bye.